because of who you are. Amen. He's Jehovah Nisi. Lord our banner. Jehovah Shiloh, the Lord our peace. Amen. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider. And you do know that you haven't really worshiped God and praised God until you can praise Him while you're going through. It's easy to praise Him when things are going well. But can you still lift His name when you're going through? I know I got some Bible from my theology. David said, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make its boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad.
Oh, yes, Lord.
Amen. Amen. I don't know about you, but I'm glad to be here today. Amen. Someone once said, and I've heard it said time and time again, it's good to be anywhere and know where you are. Amen. And some people are just existing. They're just existing. But I thank God that He has allowed me to keep the faculty of my mind. Amen.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you.
We have a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah.
Amen. A lot to be grateful for. If you have your Bibles, Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. And for those of you who are not familiar with our method of teaching and preaching, we are a Through the Bible ministry.
Amen.
And we believe in going through the Bible book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, precept upon precept, in an expositional manner. And so, as we board the gospel bus, and we are the gospel bus, and you're taking a ride with us. It lands us at Colossians chapter 3. Amen. Verse 22. Colossians chapter 3, verse 22. And I'll be reading from the New King James Version. When you find it, would you signify by saying amen?
Amen.
It says that bondservants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service, as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of your inheritance. For you serve the Lord Christ, but he who does wrong will be repaid for what he has done. And there is no partiality.
All right.
Masters, give your bondservants what is just and fair, knowing that you also have a master in heaven.
All right. Amen.
May the Lord let the blessing to the ears and readers of His holy word. I want you to know up front that the Bible is inspired, but chapter breaks are not. Amen. So if it goes over to chapter 4, that's okay. because verse 1 of chapter 4 really should be the end of chapter 3. Amen.
All right.
We're in a series titled What's Happening in Your Home? What's Happening in Your Home? Part 4. What's Happening in Your Home? And the sermon title I want to use is, how are you treating those under your authority? How are you treating those under your authority? My brothers and my sisters, the Bible does not condone slavery or support it, because slavery is a real atrocity. For anyone to own a person, to take away their freedom, and to mistreat them and abuse them is ungodly and inhumane. For anyone to oppress another person because of their race or because of their social status or the color of their skin, it is anti-Bible.
Father, help us.
Paul understood this, and from the way he writes the text, he seems to be irritated at the idea of slavery. He understands that society has its ills and humanity has its deep faults and flaws, and that he may never change the way society thinks, because the world will do what the world's going to do.
Right.
But Paul says those who are Christian slaves and those who are Christian masters, you have an obligation that is ultimately to the Lord. Amen. And so God is going to hold you accountable for how you serve and how you treat one another. Amen. And so I will admit, my brothers and my sisters, that our white evangelical counterparts down through the years have kept silent when it came to the idea of mistreatment of blacks and Hispanics. Although there was a vast difference between slavery in the Bible and slavery in America, they both were institutions of evil. Paul, nor the Bible, shies away from the subject. But through the scriptures, Paul addresses the issue of slaves and the mistreatment of them. So I don't go with those who are angry people who reject Christianity by saying that it was used to enslave blacks. If it was used to do this, at best the scriptures were twisted, manipulated, and perverted by those who tried to use it for that purpose.
Come on now.
The Bible has a lot to say about social justice.
Yes.
And I say again, the Bible did not support the institution of slavery, but understood that humanity was flawed and sought to find a way that those who were slaves and those who were Christian masters could coexist without any exploitation.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the book of Philemon is that it addresses Philemon because Onesimus was a runaway slave who was owned by Philemon. However, Onesimus was converted under Paul's gospel, and Paul encouraged him to return back to Philemon. But he wrote the letter of Philemon to tell Philemon Onesimus has now been converted. Watch this. Now, instead of treating him like a slave, treat him differently, for he is now your brother in Christ. Amen. Y'all hear what I'm trying to say? In other words, don't mistreat him, for now he is your spiritual brother. Surely Paul may have had this in mind when he wrote this passage, when he wrote this letter to the Colossians about Christian masters and Christian slaves, for he knew he would not change a broken system, but he would lean hard in on telling them how to treat one another while in the same household. So Paul understood that the cultural structure was deeply embedded within that society, but sought to give a Christian church, or give the Christian church and home a new structure that perhaps, or even perhaps, plant a seed. All right. That may eventually dismantle slavery altogether. All right. And so the fact that Paul mentions slavery in this passage is an indication that in the church of Colossae, there were both slaves and masters. Watch this. Therefore, Paul, watch this. Therefore, Paul says this. He says he desires the slaves and he desires the masters to coexist together. Because they have a God to answer to.
Yes.
Watch it. Therefore, if Christ is supreme over creation, and principalities, and powers, if he's supreme over marital relationship, if he's supreme over parental relationship within the Christian household, then he's also supreme over slaves and masters.
Yeah.
There are 2 points I want to share with you on today. Number one, you have your outlines, you can take notes. Number one, I want to look at check how you serve. Check how you serve. And then number two, check how you're supervising.
Wow.
Check how you serve. And check how you're supervising. I would that you would notice with me in verses 22 to 25, Paul says, bondservants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service or as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. Listen to this. A bondservant was one who was legally owned by another, and their whole livelihood and purpose was determined by their master. A bondservant has no rights. Their life was consumed with the servitude relationship of their master. Paul tells these slaves who are owned by their master, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh. Now, Paul uses an imperative, but it's in the present tense as well. He says, continue to obey your earthly masters. Notice he says, earthly or masters according to the flesh. This phrase is going to be key to this whole passage, because Paul said that these masters are your masters according to the flesh. They are masters, they are earthly masters and human masters. Paul said, obey them in all things. He said, don't obey them with eye service. Watch this. When Paul mentions eye service in the Greek, the word really means one that only obeys when they're under scrutiny. In other words, don't obey only when their eyes are on you. Because there are some people who won't work until somebody's watching. Y'all don't hear what I'm trying to say. Paul said, even when the master is not watching you, continue to serve. In other words, the motivation for service should not be because their eyes are on you, but your service should be rendered even when their eye of the master is not on you. Amen. This type of service is not dedicated service. This type of service is half-hearted service. Paul tells these slaves in this church, don't do this to your master. Now, I know black folk don't like to hear the word master. I get that. But y'all got to help me through the text. Amen. Amen. Got that right. That's the negative connotation. But watch it. it was most likely tempting to do this. Why? Because I'm sure that the slave dealt with some inequity. And so, but Paul commands them not to do this. He also mentions in this same verse, not just eye service, but he mentions the word men pleasers. Eye service is only serving when people are watching, but men pleasers is to serve for the purpose of gaining favor from your earthly master or master according to the flesh. In other words, it's to try to gain human favor or to be looked on with favor by the master. Paul said, tell the bondservant and commands them not to do this. Don't do what you do so you can get brownie points.
Come on now.
Don't serve so you can get in good graces with your earthly masters. This should not be your motive. If you're serving and this becomes your, if you're serving the master and this becomes the byproduct of your serving, then so be it. But do not let gaining favor from your master be the motivation.
All right.
You know, there's some people that only serve because they want something. Right. What can I get out of the deal? They want approval. They want to please earthly men. They want to feel like they have some favor with people. Now let me say something. If someone tells them that they're doing well and tells them that they are the best servant in the world, then this makes them feel like they've arrived and accomplished something. Paul said people like this are men pleasers. They need their approval from earthly men. Paul tells the Christian slaves, do not let the approval from your earthly master be the motivation for your service toward them. Paul says, rather, do it with a sincere heart, fearing God. You see that in the text? When Paul says sincere heart, this suggests to us that the type of serving that includes eye service and men pleasing is not sincere. He says, if you serve like that, then it's not true service, but it's false and phony service.
Come on now. That's right.
The word sincere is interesting because it literally means not having a double motive.
Come on. Preach, Pastor.
It means to be straightforward and forthright.
Yeah.
Paul said, don't serve with your heart filled with dual motives.
That's right.
Be straightforward in your service and honest in your service toward your earthly master. He said, serve with sincerity of heart, fearing God. In other words, don't let the fear of your earthly masters catch you slacking or fear of you losing out on favor with them be your motive for serving, but let your fear of God be your motivation. In other words, your reverence and your respect for God, for awesomeness of God, should be your motivation for a servant. Any other motive is a false motive. What Paul does in this passage is he's been doing in the past few scriptures. What he does is when he deals with the wife's submission to the husband, he changes the focus off of the husband being the focus. Right. Yeah. And what he does, he places it on Christ being the focus. Amen. He says, wives, you are ultimately submitting to Christ.
That's right.
The supremacy of Christ becomes the goal. And so, for he is Lord over the marriage relationship, and the same with the children obeying their parents. He's Lord over the parental relationship. And now Paul is telling these slaves, in essence, your servant is not ultimately to your earthly master, but it is to your heavenly Father. He's supreme in your relationship with your master. Now here it is. Pleasing Christ is the goal, not your fleshly master.
Yes. Amen.
Paul tells these slaves, check how you serve it.
That's right.
In other words, get your service in check.
That's right.
Check and see who's the one you're trying to really please.
That's right.
Is it God or is it your earthly master? See, this is what Paul says in the very next two verses. This is why what he said, the two verses 20 to 24, he says this. He said, and whatever you do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive a reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Watch this. Paul tells these slaves, whenever they serve, do it heartily.
Father.
When he says heartily, he means from the soul.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
Let me tell you something. When I help my kids, and sometimes they be broke, you know. Broke. When I help them, I'm not doing it half-heartedly. I'm doing it from the soul. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? He tells them, do it from the soul. Do it from the heart. Don't let it just be exterior service to please men or the outward show, but let the service be from the heart and the soul. He said, do it as if you're serving God. Paul gives slaves the motivation for service for the earthly master. It's not ultimately for them, but it's for the Lord.
Yes.
And I'm sure it wasn't easy because to be a slave, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. Amen. Even in biblical times, it probably wasn't easy. Amen. I'm sure that they were mistreated just like slaves and all other times were mistreated. But Paul, knowing how bad the institution of slavery was and knowing that the system may not go away, he gives the slaves something to look to beyond the earthly.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes we need that, don't we?
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to look beyond our present situation and focus on the heavenly.
Come on.
And that's why the old folk used to say, I got shoes.
Yeah.
You got shoes.
Come on.
All God's children got shoes. And when we get to heaven, we're going to put on our shoes and walk all over God's heaven.
That's right.
Why? They understood where they were, but they said, I got something better coming later.
Yeah.
Do y'all hear what I'm trying to say? And so he said, your ultimate service is not to your earthly master, but Christ, who is supreme, is the one who is supreme in the relationship. And I like what it says in verse 24 to encourage the slaves who were under the ownership of their master. He says this, he said, knowing that the Lord will receive, that from the Lord you will receive your reward of inheritance, for you serve Christ. I like that word knowing because it carries the connotation that there's something that needs to be known. Or something that's already known and will continue to be known. Here it is. Paul, there's something you just got to know.
All right.
When I started dating my wife, after the second day, I could throw her phone number off the paper away.
Yeah.
Why? Because I was going to know that number.
Right.
Do y'all hear what I'm trying to say?
Come on now.
Just like you know Victor's back, you know, or Young and Restless. Just like you know, all that stuff on Greenleaf. Do y'all hear what I'm trying? That's something you just gotta know. And Paul says, he said, knowing, watch this, knowing.
Father.
You gotta know.
Come on.
That from the Lord you will receive a reward of inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Paul said there are some things you just got to know. And what I need you to fully, he said, I need you to fully know this, that from the Lord you will receive a reward. He said, I know you got to deal with some stuff. I know you got to deal with a broken social system. I know you have, sometimes you got it seems like you're unfairly treated. But I want you to know from now on that you have a reward coming.
Yes, sir. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, it may not come from your earthly masters,
Right.
but there's a master in heaven
Yes. Yes.
who sees you
Come on. Come on.
Yes.
It's all seen.
and will reward you for your service.
Jesus.
You have an inheritance wait on you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Paul said, take your eyes off of now and put it on the beyond, because now he sets their sights on what is to come. And when you know something greater is coming later, it will help you to get through what you're going through right now. One time we got our 10-speed stolen. When I was a kid, we got our 10-speed stolen. And I was crying. Just a kid. But we just got them for Christmas. And somebody broke in our back door and stole the 10 speeds. That sounds just like the hood, don't it? Broke the house, stole the 10 speeds. And I was crying. And Mama said, that's all right. Don't worry about it. I'm going to get you another one later on. And that's what made me stop crying.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was going to get another one.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? Later. And when you know what's coming later, it will help you to get through what you're going through right now. When you know that trouble won't last always.
Right.
Then you can deal with your current trouble, because you know that there will be an end to your trials.
Yes.
And this is the hope that these slaves have to hold on to, that they serve a heavenly master that will reward them for their sincere service. Paul says, for you serve the Lord Christ. And I want you to know that he puts Lord before Christ. He could have put Christ Lord, but he puts Lord before Christ. And I believe he did this purposefully.
Yeah.
The Lord, the word kurios in the Greek, the one who is the absolute owner.
That's right.
The one who is the master. He tells them, these Christian slaves in this church, that your earthly master is the one who really owns you. Christ owns you.
That's it.
And you are his property. Not too many years ago, they had a group called God's Property, and everybody walked around wearing shirts called God's Property. The saying was true then, and the saying is true now. You belong to God. You are his property. Boy, that ought to pick somebody up out of your depression right now. Because whatever you're going through, you're still God's property. And God takes care of his property. He ain't like some slumlord.
Right.
Amen. He takes care of those who belong to him. Can I get a witness? That's why somebody said, he's a bridge over troubled water. He's water when I'm thirsty and bread when I'm hungry.
That's it.
That's because God takes care of his property.
His property.
Preach, Pastor.
It does not matter what type of social structure you are stuck in, or what your status or economic status is. If you confess Christ as Lord and Savior, you are his property. You belong to him, and for serving him, he's going to reward you.
That's what the word says. Yes, sir.
That's the motivation for keeping it pushing.
All right.
Amen. I ain't got time, but I'm going to keep it pushing. I belong to God. I'm his property. Keep it pushing beyond what you're going through right now. Because you know you got a reward waiting on you. The Lord is the one who owns you. He will see to it that you receive it. And then he places Lord Lord, then he places the Lord in front of Christ. Then he says Christ is his messianic title.
All right.
The Messiah has come for one purpose and one purpose only, and this was to redeem and to purchase our freedom.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
From spiritual bondage by giving his life on the cross sacrificially. Therefore, Paul strategically reminds these believers, these slaves, that you serve a God who is ultimate owner, but you also serve a Christ who's ultimate redeemer. He is the one that will reward you for your sincere service. But I like what Paul does in verse 25. He gives a warning to both the slave and the master. He said, but he who does wrong, y'all see that? Will be repaid for what he has done, and there is no partiality. In other words, God not only rewards for what is done right, but he repays for what's done wrong. You do know God is a gracious God, but he's also a God of justice. Amen. Verse 24 has a positive connotation, but verse 25 has a negative connotation. It is a strong motivation to do what's right. It's a strong motivation for both parties, slave and master, to do what's right. The slave will be accountable to God for how he serves the Christian earthly master. How he serves the Christian earthly master will be accountable for how he supervises. Both have to give an account to God for their stewardship. Now, I don't know about you, but when I stand before God,
All right.
I want to be rewarded, not be paid.
Right.
I want to be rewarded for what I've done good, not repaid for what I've done bad. Amen. Amen. It's not good to be on the repaid list. Amen. For what I've done bad to others, but I want to be rewarded for what God has done to me, or for what I've done to help the kingdom. Paul said, God will not be partial. He's not going to say, because you're a Jew, I'm going to let you slide. Right. Because you're Gentile, I'm going to let you. Because you're black, you're cool.
No, right.
No, you're not going to do all that. You know, okay, how many slaps? He's not going to say, because you got little money, I'll let you slide, or because you got big money, I'm going to let you slide by. No, on that day, there will be no favorites.
Right.
But everyone will receive their just reward or just repayment for how they treated each other, and there will be no partiality or favoritism.
Yeah.
You just know that God is a just God. And he's so just. Watch it. He's so just that he had to send his son to die in your place.
Right.
Because if justice would have had his way, all of us would be damned to hell.
That's right.
But Jesus Christ, who was God's spotless lamb, satisfied God's justice on the cross by dying a sacrificial death on our behalf. The innocent for the guilty, the perfect Messiah for perverted men. Jesus died to satisfy justice. And so we wouldn't have to experience his wrath. But he does not stay there for early Sunday morning. He gets up with all power in heaven and earth in his hands. And he reigns supreme over principalities and powers. This is the one who will show no partiality and will give a reward both to slave and master what is due to them on that day. Now, let me say this. Paul follows this verse beautifully in chapter 4, verse 1. He says this, masters, give your bondservants what is just and fair, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. Now he goes from telling the slaves to check how they're serving, to telling the master to check how they're supervising. To supervise means to manage or to oversee or to control.
Yes. Right.
It means to be over something or someone. Paul says, you Christian masters that are over slaves also have, I also have a word for you. It is a strong word for them. He says, give your bond servants what is just and fair. The word give is interesting because it is in the present middle imperative. It means to give out of your own resources what is equitable and fair to those that are under your authority and supervision. In other words, giving and the fair treatment should happen because of the relationship.
Amen. Amen.
Come on.
They're not only your slaves, but they're your brothers in Christ. Let this cause you to be fair in how you treat them and how you supervise them. Let the relationship of Christ cause you to be fair in the way you manage them. Hear what I say. Paul did not say they had to be equal in status.
Right.
Or equal in position. Because as long as you live there, there's always going to be somebody over you.
Right.
And watch this. And you say, I don't listen to nobody. You're going to listen to somebody.
That's right.
You're going to get 3 hots in a car. You're going to listen to somebody. Somebody's going to be over you. That's just the way life is. But Paul is saying for them to be treated fairly and equitable. In other words, the relationship in Christ drives your attitude and your action towards them. Here's the main motivation that Paul drops on the masters. Paul says, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. In other words, you have a master who rules and watches over you too.
Yeah.
And this is what the American slave owners forgot. They failed to adhere to this. They could not get past the prejudices to see that they too have someone that's watching over them. And they will have to give an account to God for how they treated their slaves, just like these masters in biblical time have to give an account for how they treated their slaves. And if this does not motivate you, I don't know what will. That you got God watching over you. Listen, I have somebody watching over me while I'm managing others and supervising others. God is watching over me and he will hold me accountable. How powerful is that? Think about this. Also, what Paul does is he's trying to get across to these slaves, the slave owners, that you also are a slave.
Wow.
Oh yeah, you got a master too. And you need to check how you're supervising over the people. You will give an account for how you serve him, and when you mistreat slaves, you are actually mistreating your brother and sister in Christ. You're mistreating the one who ultimately belongs to me, for I am Lord over you and them. He's I'm supreme over both. Paul tries to cut down on chaos and the confusion in the church and in the home of the master by telling them, both parties, to treat each other right. If the slave was to serve with a sincere heart, then God could move on the master's behalf, and he could move on the master's behalf, and they would be treating them fairly. Listen, I'm going to close this message, but watch this. There's a couple of takeaways that I need to give you. Couple takeaways.
I need to give you, because I know you look at it and say, what kind of sense does this make? And what does this have to do with the price of tea in Boston and the price of rice in China? Let me see if I can give you one to look through. Since we know we don't have slaves in our day and time, I'm talking about as far as biblical slaves were in the 21st century, then how can this text apply to you and me? Well, the best way to apply this text, one of the best ways to apply this text is this: to apply employer-employee relationships. As those who are employed by our bosses, those who supervise us, we need to check how we serve and work under their supervision. Are we working for them while on the job, or are we working for the Lord who ultimately gave us the job? Do we work hard when they're around?
Come on.
Because we fear we might get fired? Or do we fear God because He's watching us even when our bosses are not watching us? I'll never forget, I was working for Rainbow Bakery, and I hated coming in on Sunday morning, but I was only working a couple hours on Sunday morning, and just a couple hours, and I get to go to church and stuff like that. But I hated to do it because Sunday was my worship day. You know? And so I still got a chance to go to church, but I just didn't want to go up here. Right? And so I'll never forget, sometime I would get done with my work early, and I would go in between the boxes in the warehouse and take a nap. I'm telling you, I'll take a nap. And so when I think about this text today, I say, you know what? That wasn't cool. I was stealing his time, stealing the boss's time. In other words, what I failed to realize is that God was watching me.
Amen.
Okay? Now, I want to say, do you work hard so that you can get earthly accolades or favor with your boss, or is your service sincere?
Amen.
Here it is. Our service should go beyond our boss, earthly bosses, toward God. Now, some jobs, you walk in and you think the employee is the boss. The way they talk to their boss. Come on now. Y'all know y'all be acting up on y'all bosses. Staying on lunch later than you're supposed to. You know, stealing paper clips. Ink pens. You know what I'm saying? And then want to invite them to church. Just saying what I'm saying. But watch this. That's for those who are employed. But watch this. For those who have their own businesses with employees under us, or we may not be the owner of the business, but a manager or a supervisor of the company, we need to check our supervision over those who are under our authority. We cannot treat them any old kind of way. Just because you don't like them because you have a bad hair day. You didn't get your coffee that morning. So you come in mistreating those who are under you. We must treat them with equity and fairness, because we must remember that we have a God that we serve who's watching over us. He will hold us accountable for how we treated those who are under our authority. Christ is to be supreme even in our work relationship.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you today, my brothers and my sisters, how have you treated those who are under your authority? What about ministry leaders and those that are under your leadership or ministries? You have to watch how you handle those who are under your ministry.
Right, right.
You cannot just treat them like they're supposed to serve you.
That's right.
Oh, I know it's tight, but it's right.
Come on, preach.
Leader, you need to fix your attitude.
Amen.
Because there is a God in heaven who's also managing you, and he will hold you accountable for how you treated those who serve under you. You may want to be a leader, but your attitude stinks.
Come on, preach.
And your actions turn people off. God is watching over all of that and will hold you accountable. I want to ask you, ministry leaders, how are you treating those who are under your leadership authority? Another application for this text is, no matter what your social status or social position in life is, you can still serve with sincerity and serve with pure heart, because you know that God, the God you serve and the master you have in heaven will someday reward you for your faithfulness. It may be ever so difficult and it may be ever so discouraging at times, but the text tells us, my brothers and my sisters, that Christ reigns supreme and he rules the world, and he will see to it that he rewards you, if not in this life, in the next life.
Amen.
That's why I don't worry about Mitch McConnell and that old prejudice statement he made about reparation. I don't worry about Donald Trump and his racist rhetoric. They may be howling a hog right now, and they may be over us right now. They may be passing laws that exclude people of color and keep us a certain status right now. But we serve a God who's supreme. We serve a God who knows how to repay what's right. And when we are mistreated, he knows how to give us what's just due. They might be supervising the wrong way, but our God is over them. Paul says, he who does wrong will be repaid for what he has done, and there is no partiality. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat or Dixiecrat, but I'm Cosmocrat. I'm theocratic.
There you go.
God rules over me. At the end,
Very good.
we will stand before God. It won't matter whether we're slave or black, free, master, yellow, white. It won't matter how rich or poor, because those who do wrong, the Lord will judge without partiality. So I say to you, my brothers and my sisters, serve the Lord with sincerity and lead with equity. I say to you, check how you're serving and check how you're supervising. And I want to say this to you, and I want to say this as an encouraging word to you. It does not matter what condition you're in. I may be in a bad condition, but I belong to my Heavenly Father. Amen. He has not forgotten about you. And if you keep serving him, who is supreme over all creation, the one who's all sufficient, then he will reward you. I'm encouraged today, because trouble won't last always. I'm encouraged because he's watching over me. In every situation, in every circumstance, he's watching over me. And that's why the songwriter said, why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home, when Jesus is my portion, a constant friend indeed? His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. His eye. I said his eye. Not President Obama's eye. Not Trump's eye. But his eye is on the sparrow. And I know he watches over me. And that's why Maya Angelou wrote the poem, Why Does the Caged Bird Sing?
Come on now.
And I discovered that it's not, the caged bird sing because the bird is in the cage, but the cage ain't in the bird. Y'all don't hear what I'm trying to say. You can still be under the worst conditions and be free, because you know you belong to God. over you. That the same God that died on the cross for you and rose again on the third day is the same God who's watching over you. So y'all going home and give you some praise. Going home and give you some glory. I don't care what your condition is, give him some praise. Give him some glory because you got a God who's watching over you. Boy, I wish I didn't lose my voice because I feel like hollering right here. But that's all. Listen. Paul says, check how you serve. Check how you supervise. You have a heavenly Father who's over you. And he's going to reward you or repay you for what's wrong, or he will reward you for faithful service. You may be here today. Say, Pastor, I'm going through it. I feel like, boy, it's the end. It's been a long journey for me because I'm just going through one thing after another. Going through one trial after another. But today is a day that I want to make sure that everything is in check with God. I have not been serving God the way I should. I've been serving with dual motives. I've been serving because people are watching me. But I want my service to be more than just my earthly boss, but beyond that, I want to know that I want to be serving God, knowing that he's going to reward me for my faithful service. If that's you, won't you come? We're going to pray with you. My service needs to be better. My service needs to be more towards the Lord.
Amen.
I'm telling you, even if you serve in the church, you can be serving the church and not serving the Lord. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Because you're serving the organization, but you're not connected with the organism and the organizer.